stationing of Osprey helicopter airplanes here in Kaneohe, as well as Pohakuloa and other various places. And we have Auntie Terry Keko'olani here, who is a longtime peace activist, a Hawaiian national, here with us, as well as Kyle Kajihiro, who also has been working with her with Hawaii Peace and Justice, that are going to give us more information and some ways that we can help support the demilitarization of our islands. So I'll give it to Auntie Terry. Mahalo.
Well, everybody, aloha. Thanks for sticking around. For those of you that are sitting here, thank you, mahalo. Anyway, Kyle and I have been doing demilitarization work in the community for quite a while, and we wanted to take the time to talk to our people about some of the things that are going on. I'm sure you've been reading about it, you've been hearing it, in fact, and seeing a lot of what the military is doing here in our islands. And so we're just going to highlight a few things. But one thing that we really do want to emphasize is that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it, is about the stationing of 48 aircraft the Marines are proposing to bring here to the islands. Okay, so anyway, before I start to talk about the campaign, I wanted to ask you to. Somebody has to see. There's a petition going around opposing the Ospreys, and if you would read it and sign it, we really would appreciate it. Okay. I'm a member of MANA, and that's the booth right next to us. And one of the points on the platform of MANA is demilitarization. And it says, we are Hawaii, we're not Americans, we work to end the American occupation of our homeland. We oppose the use of Hawaii as a launching pad and recruiting pool for U.S. wars. And we oppose the destruction of our Aina and sacred sites and the political and economic enlistment of our people for U.S. wars. And we will work for the demilitarization of our land and society and the cleanup and return of militarized lands. That's one of the 10 unifying points of MANA, and I wanted to point that out to you. So this is where I'm coming from as part of being in this organization. Now, we're going to do two things. I've asked Kyle Kajihiro, who has been doing this kind of work for many, many years, to talk about the current political situation that we're in the United States, making the Pacific a pivot point or a very, very important position for military buildup in the Pacific. And so I'm going to let him talk about what that means, giving you kind of an overview of what's going on with the buildup. And then I will talk specifically about the Osprey helicopters, okay? Mahalo.
Okay, aloha everybody. Thank you for the chance to share with you folks. Terry and I work together at the Hawaii Peace and Justice Organization. We have a tent on the other side. And part of our work is to build a network called DMZ Hawaii Aloha Aina, the Demilitarization Network. We realized that there were many communities affected by the military in Hawaii and an immense tradition of resisting to protect the Aina, to Kaho'olawe, Makua, Waikane, many places. But we haven't brought all these communities together to talk about the threats that we're facing in the present. And so about 2002 we came together. We invited the Makua folks, Malama Makua. We invited folks from Waikane, Pohakuloa, Kauai. We sat down and we formed a network called DMZ Hawaii Aloha Aina. So we provide support to have communication and to develop shared strategies. And we also try to be a link between Hawaii and the international movements that are confronting the growing number of U.S. military bases around the world. There's over 1,000 U.S. military bases. This is, any part of the planet that you look, there are military bases. And the trend is that these bases are now becoming smaller, more portable. If a base can be portable, they're calling it lily pads. So instead of these monster bases like Hickam and Pearl Harbor and Schofield, maybe leasing a little bit of land in a Philippines air base or in Thailand or in Singapore, and they'll pre-position weapons, equipment, supplies there. In the event that they might need it, they can just jump to the lily pad and jump to the next one. And so this is a new strategy that we have to watch about the U.S. It's whether we count these as U.S. bases or not is a question, right? Because still technically it's a Filipino base or it's a Thai base. But this is the new strategy. It's outsourcing and sort of fragmenting their footprint so that it's harder to track them, and it's less overhead in a way, right, for the military. So this is a new trend we're seeing. But as Brother Andre said earlier, you know, ikavama mua kavama hope, to face the past is the past is the future. In the past is the future, right? To look in the history and to discern from history what the patterns of what's happening. I think we got to look back, you know, in Hawaii's history. This is a new time and there's new threats that we're facing, but it's also old patterns. So I think there's stuff we can also learn about that. If you look at President Roosevelt in 1905, he said, you know, the United States its history will be determined more by the Pacific than by the Atlantic. So they were already seeing that China was the prize, was the main rival, and that the Pacific was this space that they had to get across and control in order to become the dominant power. In 1900, Senator Beveridge, he was a notorious expansionist, he said the Pacific is our ocean. And the country that controls the Pacific controls the world, and the American Republic will forever be that power, right? This is how arrogant this thinking was. So they were already treating the Pacific Ocean, Kamoana Nui, the great ocean that connects all the peoples of the Pacific, treating it as an American lake. And in that kind of imperialist imagination, you look in from the outside or you look across to the other side, but you don't see the vibrant cultures and peoples and history that lives in the middle, right? And so this is part of what we're trying to counter, is to say that no, these voices that are here really matter. And back in November, when the APEC was meeting in town, there was a conference called Moana Nui that brought together people from around the Pacific region to talk about what is the people's vision of a sovereign, of a free Pacific. How do we build peace and security through human contact as opposed to the force of a gun, right? And one of the things that happened at that APEC meeting is President Obama announced formally that the United States was making a pivot. They were going to decrease its forces in Europe and concentrate them on the Asia Pacific. Because what's happening is the United States realizes that with China rising in its economic power and also its military power, it could be a potential rival to the United States dominance. And so the United States strategy is to create a coalition of other countries that will play with the United States under its rules and sort of ice out China. You notice China wasn't invited to this year's RIMPAC games, right? RIMPAC training. And they're building more bases to surround China. So basically to try to enclose it and control all the sea lanes, the main sea lanes. For the United States to be a Pacific power and to exert its presence and its power into Asia, it needed islands, it needed manifest destiny, I think Tanya mentioned, right? It needed stepping stones across the Pacific. So that's the primary reason why Hawaii was overthrown and occupied. And the key to that occupation was always Keawalau o Pu'uloa, and we have a little display about some of our educational efforts to reclaim the name Keawalau o Pu'uloa, the many bays of Pu'uloa. It's not Pearl Harbor. It wasn't Pearl Harbor until that's the American base that was built there, right? But Keawalau Pu'uloa was the food basket of Oahu. There were something like over 36 fish ponds that fed the people of Oahu. Made Oahu aina mamona, fat land, abundant land. And now it houses 748 or 749 contamination sites. It's a giant superfund. If you go down there, you'll see the signs that say, don't eat the fish, don't go swimming, right? So within a few short 100 years, from a food basket to a place of war, a place of ecological catastrophe. That's been the cost of all this military prosperity for Hawaii. The one thing I just want to mention about the pivot, when you have a pivot in mechanics, right, in your physics class, A pivot uses a fulcrum, something that you balance it on, and then you can lift objects with less force applied to the one end, right? So you need a fulcrum in a pivot. I will argue that Hawaii is the primary fulcrum of U.S. power in the Pacific, and it uses other islands like Guam, like the Marshall Islands, like Okinawa, right, like Korea and these other places as fulcrum to also leverage their power, because it's a far distance from the West Coast to Asia. But with these points of leverage, that they think that they can impose their will and control, because we're small, we're isolated in their mind, it's easier to manage an occupation. But I think that the thing we have is the ability to network and to build on those ancient relationships of friendship and solidarity and culture across the Pacific. And so to weave our strands of our history together into a net that's much stronger than its individual strands, so that we can restrain these forces that are threatening us. So the other thing I just want to, just in terms of the current context, what we're seeing right now that's leading up to this Osprey move, and a proposal that was recently made to move 2,700 more Marines to Hawaii. In Japan, there's been tremendous opposition, and especially in the island of Okinawa, there's been immense opposition to the U.S. bases there. And that has held up the repositioning of troops and bases. And so basically the United States got tired of this stalemate, and they said, well, we're going to move 9,000 troops out and scatter them to different locations. So Guam will get 4,700 troops plus dependents. Australia will get 2,500 troops in northern part to train, and Hawaii is supposed to get 2,700. Plus there's these new basing arrangements being made, as I mentioned earlier, around the Pacific. So, you know, we are building relationships with our brothers and sisters in Okinawa, in Guam, and these other places, because we got to work together. It cannot be, oh, get out of Okinawa, go to Guam, go to Hawaii, right? That's not a solution for us. We need a solution that actually reduces the overall burden of these military bases, because they don't bring peace or security to anyone in this region. And so I want to thank you all for coming, and pass it off to my comrade Terry to tell you about the specifics of the threat that's coming down. Thank you.
Call me comrade. Anyway, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plans that the Marines have for us. And Ilima there is going to pass around. This is stuff that the Marines have actually printed out and issued to the community. And this is the U.S. Marine Corps is proposing to base 48 aircraft at the Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station. Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station, actually that land is a very, very important wahipana. It's called Mo'okapu. Okay? 48 aircraft. The Marines propose to base 2 squadrons of what is described at, and it's on the picture there, as Ospreys. They're half airplane and they're half helicopter. They're huge and they make a lot of noise and a lot of the, what do you call it, the wind? Yeah, the downdraft. So they're proposing to bring 2 squadrons of 24 Ospreys here. They're also proposing to bring 2 squadrons of Huey and Cobra attack helicopters, all being stationed at Kaneohe Marine Corps. But we'll be training, they'll be using those helicopters and training in other areas of the Hawaiian Islands. For example, they'll be training in the Big Island, in Pohakuloa and Upolu. Pohakuloa is a very big army facility. It's 133,000 acres. It's the only live fire military training facility on the island, in the islands, and it's growing. It's big. So they propose to do the training there, as well as in Upolu. On the island of Oahu, they'll be training at Bellows, Kahuku, Dillingham, Kawailoa, up in Schofield Barracks, and at Mokapu itself. On the island of Molokai, some of us were just stunned when we heard that they're going to go to Molokai. Yeah, so they're going to use, I think, a landing pad over in Ho'olehua. That's where Uncle Walter them live, right? And also they'll be using or training not with the Ospreys, with other helicopters over in Kalaupapa. Now, maybe you read this whole thing about they were going to do like something like 1,500 flights over, and now they've gone back to reduce it to 120. That's 120 too many for us, yeah. Especially in a place like Kalapapa. They're also going to be training on the island of Kauai over at the Pacific Missile Range facility and going all the way out to Ku'ula. So that whole sphere of a body of water from the Pacific Missile Range on the northwest of the island of Kauai all the way over to Ka'ula is where they're going to be training. That just gives you a picture of the breadth of the islands that they're going to be using. The other thing is, at Mo'okapu itself, in order to have these new aircraft, they're going to be destroying and building hangars. And also they're going to be extending the airfield there. And I want to mention a little something about Mo'okapu. Mo'okapu at one time, where you have the sand dunes of Mo'okapu going from Ulupa'u all the way over to the Kualoa side of Mo'okapu. It was our sand dunes, and those sand dunes were traditionally used as burial grounds. Yeah. So when the military condemned the area for building an airfield and building a base, they actually built their airfield over burial grounds. And I don't think many people know that. Also, when they built the runway, when they built different roads, even buildings, they would take the sand and make it into concrete. And so many times you will find when they're doing renovations or building new places, they will come across human remains in these concrete slabs. And so we have asked the Marines really not to do any more building, to actually stop and to actually, lessen any kind of activity just because of that alone. The other thing that I want to mention is that with the coming of the Ospreys in particular, they're going to be bringing in 1,100 personnel. In addition to the Marines that they already have. They have like about 11,700 Marines already here in the islands, yeah? They're going to bring 1,000 more personnel in addition to their dependents, which is something like 2,000. That's more people coming on our island, yeah? So some of the things that we've been, that there's like a groundswell of opposition in the community, and some of the issues that the people are talking about is, number one, the sound. Number two, the hazard. There have been crashes within the last year of the Osprey in, I think, Morocco and Afghanistan, and even in Florida. So we're very concerned about the flight pattern, where they're going. And where Mo'okapu is, there's a intermediate school, King Intermediate School. They're going to be flying over it. We're very concerned about the safety of the children, not only from the possibility of a crash taking place, but by the very sound of it. Constant sound, yeah, and for the training. And for us as Kanaka Maoli, there have been some of us in the community participating in a Section 106 conversation. Basically, this is what it is. It's a federal law that tells Native people that their concerns about historic and cultural sites must be addressed when you have these kinds of big activities, yeah? So some of us have been on consultation calls with the Marines since February, and what they have tried to do is put a programmatic agreement together that mitigates, in their eyes, some of our concerns. And I can tell you, having been involved from February, that many of the Native Hawaiian consulting parties refuse to sign the programmatic agreement, and that includes OHA. OHA just came out on Friday with a stand that they cannot do it because too many of our concerns, too many of our people's concerns are not being adequately addressed. So that's a good thing that they took that position. Anyway, that's a lot. I'm sorry I'm rushing through it, but kind of short on the time. So if if it's okay, Ilima, I'll take questions now. And Ilima's going to facilitate, so she's going to help us out. Mahalo.
Does anybody have questions? Or a question?
I don't know about that.
Okay, so the whole idea of sharing and educating us is to tell us how can we help besides signing the petition.
I just had a conversation with a gentleman who's trying to do a news article. He's actually based in Japan, and his question to me was, you know, when people in Okinawa fight against the U.S. bases, and trying to get them out, they're from Okinawa. So how do you folks in Hawaii, who are, you know, dominated by the United States, what do you do? How do you feel? So this is my answer to you. You need to say something. We need to say something. We need to step up and say that this is not acceptable. That these islands are, you know, this is our homeland, you know. And having, not just being taken over, but all of these many, many years of military bases blooming, you know. These are lands that are taken away from us. The gates that are put up, you can't go into these areas. You lose your connection and your memory of these places if you don't have access to them. You don't know their names. They have roads, 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what I mean? So we lose our connection with our Aina, and we need that connection. We have to reclaim these places. The second thing is they're the greatest polluters. They pollute our Aina big time. Kahea is an organization that not too long ago put out information about, you know, contaminants that you can find in military bases, all the way from depleted uranium to lead to RXD and TNT. When you have all of this stuff contaminating your Aina, where do you think it goes? It's just like Uncle Walter talked about earlier. You have wind. Does the depleted uranium stay in one place? No. It goes in the wind. It goes into the water systems. It goes out into the ocean. This is contaminants. Yeah. So I guess the most important thing is to, you know, open your eyes, stay informed, but also say something too, you know, about not accepting this anymore. That's basically it. And sign the petition.
And just to add to what Terry said, you know, I think we need to look to the struggles like Kaho'olawe, like Makua, for examples and for lessons about what worked, and also what we should do differently. Terry and I went to the island of Vieques in 1999. It's a little island off the coast of Puerto Rico that was bombed by the Navy, similar to Kaho'olawe, for about 50, 60 years. And in 99, a man was killed by a bomb, and it sparked a new wave of protests. So people went into the bombing range. They occupied that for a year before several hundred were arrested. They kept coming back every time there was training and disrupting the training, right? So when they have like a RIM pack like this, instead of being able to come and shoot their guns and bomb the island, people were inside the range, continually messing it up. So it became impossible for the Navy to do its training, and they eventually said, okay, this is too much. They also had tremendous support through the diaspora of Puerto Ricans in the US. The network of Puerto Ricans and other Latinos got mobilized, and they got a lot of numbers, right? In Chicago, in New York, and all the Mexicans joined in with them. And so there was a lot of support that was making it a political issue that the US needed to deal with. I bring that up because a couple of things is that I think that often we feel like, wow, you know, we're so small, we're so little, America's so powerful, we can't do anything. But if you look at the history, we've been able to use that like jiu-jitsu, you know, you use your leverage of your opponent to flip them, to huli them over, right? That's a that's using a fulcrum to move a bigger object. And so I think we can use our what is our strength, right? The history, the truth of what has happened to Hawaii, and the love and spiritual and genealogical connections people have to the land is something that preempts military, federal, whatever. You know, those are claims that are ancient and that allow for a claim to be made that's much more morally, much more powerful, I think, than a piece of paper that we stole it fair and square, right? That's how the U.S. will deal with it. We stole it fair and square. And no, you didn't. There's still connections. The other thing is that people having living relations and connections to the land is so important, because that's how the land lives, is through the connections with people, yeah? And, you know, Kaho'olawe was similar. Makua, that's been part of the practice, is to reestablish those ties. And by removing people, you know, the government creates orphans. They create wandering souls that are not connected to their genealogical birthplace or where their families are from. And so by connecting again and reestablishing those practices and that ike, that knowledge of these places, that the place begins to live in a different way. And so whether it's Lihue, Wahewa, Waimanalo, Mokapu, Pohakuloa, you know, to reassert those rights to be in there and to practice, I think that's really important. Civil resistance is really important, I think. And, you know, Kaho'olawe folks went on the island and resisted. In Makua, there's been waves of resistance. In Vieques, that was also successful. And I say it not in a way to say like, somehow we have to get arrested as a last resort or whatever because, you know, the government is not listening. In some ways, resisting that authority is the most creative and fruitful thing that we can do, right? When the law and the system is unjust, by standing up to it, you unlock your mind to the potential of other possibilities. That's some of the most amazing creative energies that are released when people are not afraid anymore of these authorities, right? And so the things that comes out of that is cultural revivals. You know, in Vieques, they started a women's group out of the struggle. The ecumenical coalition came together for the first time. Catholics, evangelicals, and Protestants talked to each other for the first time in a long time. Because of the Vieques movement, the youth got organized. And so it unleashes all these other potential collaborations and initiatives that makes the community richer because of it, right? Because we start to live, hey, we don't have to live in fear, we don't have to live under this oppression. We can create our own community the way we want it to work. And I think that that's a tremendous good that comes out of any of these kind of struggles, right? So what the Occupy movement, what the Arab Spring, when they stood up to their government, they created a whole new possibility. And so that's the idea of a kipuka, right? Like the kipuka is the lava, when the forest that it remains when the lava flows, and that's a source of new life that repopulates the forest, right? The community, the Hawaiian communities that held on to their traditional knowledge and sort of resisted the onslaught of Western development, those were cultural kipuka. But I would also say that the political movements that stand up to those onslaughts are kind of political kipuka. It creates a space like this here has become a kipuka. It's a world, it's an opening into a different reality that we can taste it maybe for today, but we'll hold on to that taste and we'll start to enact it and continue to make it grow into the future. And by spreading these seeds, you know, we can create the new world one day at a time by coming together like this. So that's just what I wanted to share.
Oh.
A secret weapon, just like the military would call it.
So the question was, what is the time frame for all of this?
For the final environmental impact statement, all deadlines, POW. Yeah, they're all POW. So the military, I mean the Marines should be announcing a record of decision very, very soon. That is why as Kanakamaoli, I think we still have a little wedge as far as talking about it through the Section 106, and that is the historic cultural sites. Yeah, that's going to be good. That's going to be ongoing. The other thing, did I answer your question? It's all PAL, so the record of decision is coming out very soon, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention too is that there's talk and there's movement towards actually asking for a moratorium on the buildup. But asking this moratorium as Kanakamaoli, yeah. So some of us are going to be going to OHA on Tuesday to talk to the leaders about coming forward and making this to them, making them realize we have a real crisis going on. Because it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse, yeah. Especially when the Marines are announcing they're going to be bringing over, what, 4,000 people. Where are they going to put them? Yeah, and the other thing too is it's also this militaristic sense and presence in our society, which is kind of built on fear, you know. So we are going to be raising this to OHA, and hopefully we will get some good, response for them. Other than that, if there's no other questions, thank you so much for coming to our little section. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Especially the research that you did on your own, kind of information getting
right. Yes.
Current events.
Yeah. Okay. To answer your question, DMZ Hawaii. It's we want to know how to get information.
What your question was? How to get more information, or?
Well, yeah, and where do you base your own information? I'm sure you guys have trusted sources that allow you to kind of make.
So the question was, how do we get our information so that we have a perspective on these things? So some of it is just by reading all these piles of documents and trying to read between the lines to understand what they're saying, but also it's being in touch with news from around the region, because a lot of times that tells us a lot about what's happening. We could kind of tell that we were going to get hit when we saw that the Okinawans were being successful in stopping the base there. We were like, okay, something's going to shift, right? And so we were anticipating that some of this stuff is coming down. But it's always hard to know, like even the 2,700 troops, they're not saying details yet. That's a few years down the road where they're going to have to do studies. The problem is they've gotten, the decisions are already made, and they do the studies to justify the decision. So it's a predetermined outcome. And we always name that, and we say this is an illegitimate process because of that, but that's how they do it. The other thing is that we've been able to use these processes as a way to fight them, right? By using the EIS to put in comments, to slow it down, to sue them. It's been a tool that has had some use, but it's becoming limited in its usefulness now. The military has gotten more sophisticated at how to control and contain the process. So they will do all the steps that they need to check off their list. You had a chance to comment. We took your comments into consideration, and we still made our decision. So you have no right to say anything more, right? Because the law doesn't allow us to stop it outright. That's the reality of it. So there's only limits to how much you can use a legal strategy, which is why I think more people need to get involved at your local areas, right? To sign up on our list so that you can get information, but also to if you're involved in groups, educate them and have them speak out against it. The silence is part of what keeps the system in place, because everyone's afraid to go up against to be named as unpatriotic, or to have Senator Inouye cut your funding for your programs, right? That's the way that people are extorted, how consent is extorted out of us through the funding. So we need to have our groups come out and say, on the principle, on the justice questions, it's not right, and we oppose these things happening, to speak out against the buildup. I think Terry mentioned the moratorium. I think that that's a really good idea. If more groups would support a position like that, meaning, you know, stop the buildup already. We need land to come back, to be restored, right? To consider, and what's going to get thrown at you is always what's jobs. You know, the military's the economy. We gotta do this. But I ask you, who gets paid in the military economy, and who pays the price for all of that prosperity, right? Somebody's getting paid, and a lot of times it's called Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and some of these construction guys, right? But who pays the price? Hawaiian ceded lands, Pu'uloa, 750 contaminated sites, right? Over 960 contaminated sites in the islands, right? Oahu Island, 24.6% of the island is controlled by the military. So who's paying the price for all of that, right? And that's never factored into their economic forecast. So we always got to throw that back at them. It's like, you know, we're not willing to pay that price, you know. Well, thank you.